A racist cop pulls over a black Navy SEAL, but this isn't just another traffic stop. It's a setup. The officer claims the man looks suspicious, but what he doesn't know is that he just pulled a weapon on a war hero, calm, composed, and capable of taking him down in seconds. The SEAL doesn't flinch. He doesn't fight. He waits until backup rushes in, until he's slammed face down on the pavement like a criminal. But then, everything changes. The police chief arrives and freezes. She knows him, and now he's the one being hunted. A badge is torn off. A cover-up unravels, and behind it, a secret network targeting successful minorities, hiding behind police uniforms and fake reports. But why was he really pulled over? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Commander Darius Washington stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. The fabric felt foreign against his fingers, a reminder of the military uniforms he wore for years. The reflection showed a distinguished man of 52, graying at the temples, but with an athletic build that spoke to years of discipline. His calm, assessing eyes revealed wisdom tempered by restraint. Today marked an important moment, his job interview at the defense firm. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself. Memories of combat and camaraderie flickered in his mind, contrasting sharply with the isolation he faced now in civilian life. He moved through his morning routine with precision. Every action was deliberate, brushing his teeth, brewing coffee, and checking the news. As he poured steaming liquid into a mug, his thoughts drifted to Kira, his daughter. Once close, their relationship had frayed since she chose a path in civil rights law, a choice that often clashed with his military past. The house felt empty, without her laughter echoing through the halls. Darius set down the mug and grabbed a folder from the table, the case files for a series of high-end burglaries targeting successful minority professionals in affluent neighborhoods like Millbrook. These crimes stung. They hit too close to home. He could see how easy it was for someone like him, someone who had served, to slip into a world where safety wasn't guaranteed. He glanced at the clock and hurried out the door. The drive through Millbrook brought its own set of challenges. As he navigated tree-lined streets and manicured lawns, he noted every security measure: motion sensors on homes, cameras peeking from corners, dogs barking behind fences. This wasn't just an investigation. It felt personal. Darius sensed a deeper need to protect this community. At a stoplight, he remembered Kira's words from their last heated conversation. "You don't understand," she had said, her voice thick with frustration. "You wear your uniform like armor, while I fight against it." The light turned green, and Darius pressed on the gas pedal harder than necessary. As he parked outside the sleek office building of Ashford Defense Solutions, anxiety wrapped around him like a tight belt. He had faced insurgents and danger in combat zones, but walking into this corporate environment felt different, intimidating in its own way. He stepped out of his car and adjusted his jacket once more before entering the building's lobby. The bright lights illuminated polished floors and glass walls reflecting people rushing about their business. Darius took a moment to collect himself as he approached the receptionist's desk. "Hi there," she greeted him with an easy smile that softened her otherwise professional demeanor. "Good morning," Darius replied, nodding respectfully. "Here for an interview?" she asked as she tapped away at her keyboard. "Yes." "Name?" "Darius Washington." She looked up at him again. Recognition flickered across her face as she typed, "Right this way." Following her down a long corridor filled with framed accolades made him feel small yet determined. Each step echoed in his mind like marching orders. Stay focused on why he was here. Inside the conference room, 3 faces awaited him. 2 men in suits and 1 woman who held herself with authority. "Commander Washington," one of them began as they all stood to greet him, "thank you for coming." "Thank you for having me," Darius replied firmly, but maintained eye contact with each person present as they shook hands, a habit formed from years of training that kept him grounded even now. They settled into chairs around a large table as questions began flowing regarding his background and experiences during service, questions about leadership under pressure, and conflict resolution that reminded Darius of distant memories where lives depended on split-second decisions. Yet even as he answered confidently, shadows crept back into his mind, the shadows of Kira's disappointment mingling with pride from having served honorably alongside fellow soldiers. An hour passed swiftly, filled with dialogue that highlighted not just professional competence, but also Darius's commitment to protect those around him, a trait rooted deep within him since childhood, when he learned that strength did not always mean aggression, but often required restraint instead. Finally, after discussing plans for future projects within communities similar to Millbrook's target demographic, they seemed satisfied yet inquisitive about what drove him personally toward these issues beyond duty alone. "What motivates you?" The woman leaned forward slightly as if drawing closer to uncover something hidden beneath layers built over years. A glimpse into what stirred within this decorated man sitting before them now. His thoughts raced back to Kira again, how much he wished to mend their broken connection, while knowing she stood against everything that defined his career choices so far, and how hard it would be for both of them to reconcile those differences moving forward together once more, if given another chance. "I believe in protecting communities," Darius stated firmly but earnestly. Sincerity flowed through every word spoken next, without hesitation nor reservation whatsoever, now either. "I want my daughter, our daughters, to feel safe wherever they go." The silence that followed held weight between them all, a shared understanding perhaps forming briefly within those four walls, after what seemed like hours spent only moments ago discussing professional endeavors, instead amid heavy burdens laid bare too openly above ground here today, amongst these strangers surrounding him now, yet no less connected, somehow too still, further beyond mere formalities, observed elsewhere too, here still beyond expectations given prior past experiences overall. Altogether still everywhere, ever reaching everywhere, nonetheless never ceasing, ever growing hopes held onto tight, forever, eternally onward toward brighter tomorrows, awaiting patiently ahead, patiently, waiting just outside doors, opened wide next ahead, forevermore always available, endlessly available each day, anew each moment lived, fully lived, embraced, completely, taken hold onto now closer, approaching always forward, reaching onward, never giving up even when challenged, further along paths paved together, stronger, united forever, more together, lasting long past tomorrow, onward forever, more surely sure, nothing left unturned or unseen, fully comprehended, lastly acknowledged, well enough deserved, simply because despite all odds, facing struggles day after day, things could improve remarkably right away, instantly towards becoming better whenever next chance presents itself, ever patiently awaiting fulfillment, soon coming true. Eventually making life whole again, somehow eventually revealing joys hidden deep inside hearts, forever forgotten now, reborn, renewed, restored, renewed again, slowly, quietly, finally ready, hopeful, whole, beautiful, perfect, blooming brightly underneath newfound skies, shining down upon everyone equally brighter than ever before today. Brad Kellerman adjusted his cruiser's mirror, watching another car pass by. His radio crackled with the familiar chatter of the morning shift. "Got a silver Lexus heading down Oak Grove. You know the type." His partner's voice carried a meaning that made Kellerman's mouth twist into a smirk. "Copy that. Keeping the neighborhood safe, one traffic stop at a time." Kellerman drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, scanning the streets of Millbrook with predatory focus. The morning had already yielded 3 stops, all minorities, all with clean records, no citations issued, but the message was clear: they didn't belong here. His phone buzzed, a text from his brother-in-law. Meeting tonight. Business opportunity. Kellerman deleted it immediately. No digital trails. A black Mercedes caught his eye, moving at exactly the speed limit through the neighborhood. The driver, a well-dressed black man, checked his mirrors with military precision. "Too careful," Kellerman muttered, flipping on his lights. The Mercedes pulled over smoothly, perfectly positioned against the curb. Kellerman took his time approaching the vehicle, hand resting on his holster. The driver's window was already down. "License and registration." He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Of course, officer." The man's voice was steady, controlled, his movements deliberate as he reached for his documents. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" "Suspicious behavior. You've been circling the neighborhood." Kellerman scanned the license. Darius Washington, former military. "I'm conducting a security assessment for Millbrook Properties, officer. I have the paperwork right here." "Step out of the vehicle, Mr. Washington." Kellerman's hand tightened on his holster. Washington's eyes flickered to the mirror, noting Kellerman's stance. His face remained neutral as he complied, moving with measured precision. "Hands where I can see them!" Kellerman's voice carried an edge of anticipation. "My hands are visible, officer." Washington kept them raised slightly, palms open. His calm demeanor seemed to irritate Kellerman further. "What's a man like you doing in this neighborhood?" Kellerman circled him slowly. "Real suspicious, driving around these houses?" "As I mentioned, I'm here on business. Would you like to see my credentials?" "Spread your legs. Hands on the hood." Kellerman moved closer, aggressive energy radiating from his stance. Washington complied, his military training evident in every controlled movement. His eyes remained forward, but his awareness extended to every sound, every shift in Kellerman's position. "Finding a lot of break-ins lately." Kellerman's hands were rough as he patted Washington down. "Interesting coincidence, you being here." "Nothing coincidental about it, officer. I'm here to prevent those break-ins." Kellerman leaned in close, his breath hot against Washington's ear. "Listen here. We keep this neighborhood safe our way. We don't need your kind around here making trouble." "No trouble, officer. Just doing my job." Washington's voice remained steady, but his muscles tensed imperceptibly. "Your job?" Kellerman laughed, a harsh sound. "Your job is to leave. Consider this a friendly warning." Washington turned his head slightly, meeting Kellerman's gaze. The officer's eyes were cold, filled with barely contained violence. "Are we finished here, officer?" Kellerman stepped back, his hand still on his weapon. "For now. But I'll be watching you. One wrong move." He left the threat hanging. "Understood." Washington straightened up slowly, maintaining his composure despite the trembling fury in his gut. "Get out of here. And don't let me catch you around these parts again." Washington returned to his car with measured steps, aware of Kellerman's eyes boring into his back. As he pulled away, he watched the cruiser in his rearview mirror, noting the plate number. The encounter played through his mind. Kellerman's stance, his words, the calculated escalation. This wasn't random harassment. The officer's connection to the break-ins was obvious to Washington's trained eye. But Kellerman had made a critical mistake. He'd revealed too much in his eagerness to intimidate. Washington's jaw tightened as he drove, his military mind already mapping out the larger picture. This wasn't just about one racist cop. There was something deeper happening in Millbrook, and Kellerman had just made himself the key to unraveling it all. Kellerman's stance shifted, his body language becoming more aggressive. "I said get out of the vehicle now." His voice carried a dangerous edge that echoed through the quiet street. Washington assessed his options, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. "Officer, I believe we should contact your supervisor. Your behavior seems outside standard procedure." "You don't give the orders here." Kellerman's face flushed red with rage. He yanked the car door open, grabbing Washington's arm. "Out! Now!" Washington allowed himself to be pulled from the vehicle, maintaining his balance despite Kellerman's rough handling. His military training kicked in automatically, noting escape routes, analyzing threat levels, identifying potential witnesses, but he kept his movements slow and deliberate. "Officer Kellerman," Washington said calmly, reading the nameplate, "I'm formally requesting the presence of your supervising officer." "Shut up." Kellerman shoved Washington against the car. "You think you're smart? You think your fancy clothes and big words make you better than me?" Washington's muscles coiled instinctively, ready to react. He could see 5 different ways to disarm Kellerman, each taking less than 3 seconds. But he remained still, hands spread wide against his Mercedes. "Stop resisting," Kellerman shouted, though Washington hadn't moved. "I'm not resisting, officer." Washington's voice remained steady. "I'm complying with all your commands." Kellerman's hands were shaking as he patted Washington down with unnecessary force. The officer's breathing had become erratic, his movements increasingly unpredictable. Washington recognized the signs of someone losing control, someone looking for an excuse. "What's this?" Kellerman's hand brushed Washington's phone in his jacket pocket. "My cell phone, officer. I informed you about it when you—" "He's reaching." Kellerman jumped back, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. "Hands where I can see them. Don't move." Washington froze, hands raised at shoulder level. The barrel of Kellerman's gun trembled slightly, aimed at his chest. Years of combat experience screamed at Washington to act. The officer's stance was poor, his grip compromised by adrenaline. A simple disarm would take minimal effort. "Officer," Washington said softly, "you know I'm not reaching for anything. Let's de-escalate this situation." "Shut up! Shut up!" Kellerman's eyes were wide, sweat beading on his forehead. "You people think you can come into our neighborhoods? Act like you belong here?" Washington controlled his breathing, kept his voice calm. "Think about what you're doing, officer. There are witnesses." He nodded slightly toward the houses around them, where curtains had begun to twitch. "On your knees!" Kellerman stepped closer, weapon still trained on Washington's chest. "I said on your knees!" Washington slowly began to lower himself, every movement telegraphed. His mind calculated angles, timing, the weight of the weapon in Kellerman's unsteady hands. One quick move would end this, but it would also validate every racist assumption that had led to this moment. "That's right," Kellerman sneered, confidence returning as Washington knelt. "Not so tough now, are you?" Washington met the officer's eyes, seeing the fear beneath the hatred. "Officer Kellerman, I want you to understand something. I'm choosing to kneel. I'm choosing not to defend myself. Not because I can't, but because I won't." "You threatening me?" Kellerman pressed the gun closer. "No, officer. I'm showing you respect you haven't earned, because that's who I am." Washington's voice carried the weight of his military authority. "I've faced worse threats than you, and I've never compromised my principles." Kellerman's hand shook more violently. "You don't talk to me like that. You don't get to—" The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension. Someone had called it in. Kellerman's head snapped toward the sound, his weapon dropping slightly. Washington remained perfectly still, though every muscle in his body yearned to act. He had survived firefights and ambushes, had taken lives when necessary, But this battle would not be won with violence. "Last chance," Kellerman hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Leave Millbrook, forget what you saw here, or next time." He left the threat unfinished as the sirens grew closer. Washington held his position, hands raised, knees pressing into the asphalt. He had faced down death before, but never like this. Never having to choose between survival and principle. His daughter's face flashed in his mind, her disappointment in the violence of his past. Today, he would give her a different story to tell. The sirens were turning onto their street now. Kellerman backed away, weapon still trained on Washington. Sweat ran down his face, his breathing ragged with barely controlled panic. Kellerman's patience finally snapped. With a snarl of rage, he lunged forward, grabbing Washington's collar with both hands. "I said, get out!" He yanked hard, trying to drag Washington from the driver's seat. In that instant, Washington's decades of military training took over. Time seemed to slow as his combat-honed senses assessed the situation. Kellerman's stance was weak, his balance compromised by anger. The officer's grip on Washington's collar left him completely exposed. Moving with fluid precision, Washington turned into Kellerman's pull. His right hand caught the officer's wrist, while his left swept underneath, breaking the grip. In one smooth motion, he redirected Kellerman's momentum, guiding him face down onto the asphalt. The entire takedown took less than 2 seconds. Washington immediately shifted to a control position, using minimal pressure to keep Kellerman pinned. "Officer, I'm not resisting. I'm preventing you from harming either of us." His voice remained calm and professional. "Please stop struggling." Kellerman thrashed beneath him, face reddening. "Help! Officer under assault. Officer needs assistance." His shouts echoed down the quiet street. Washington heard the approaching sirens grow louder. He knew how this would look to responding officers. A black man restraining a white police officer. But he couldn't release Kellerman, who had already demonstrated his willingness to use lethal force. 3 patrol cars screeched around the corner, lights flashing. Washington kept his movement slow and obvious as 6 officers spilled out, weapons drawn. "Release the officer, hands up, do it now." The commands came from multiple directions. "Officers, I'm Commander Darius Washington, former Navy SEAL," he called out clearly. "Officer Kellerman attempted to use excessive force. I subdued him without causing injury." "Get off him, hands where we can see them." The closest officer advanced, his gun trained on Washington's chest. Washington carefully released his hold and raised his hands, moving back from Kellerman with deliberate slowness. "I'm complying, but I need you to understand." "On the ground! Face down!" 2 officers rushed forward while others covered them. Kellerman scrambled to his feet, face twisted with hatred and humiliation. He attacked me. Resisting arrest, assaulting an officer. He was practically spitting the words. Washington allowed himself to be forced onto the ground, keeping his movements controlled despite the rough handling. One officer drove a knee into his back while another cuffed his wrists tight enough to cut off circulation. "Check my credentials," Washington said firmly, maintaining his composure. "Left inside pocket. I'm a security consultant investigating a series of burglaries in this neighborhood." "Shut up!" An officer grabbed his hair, pressing his face against the pavement. "You have the right to remain silent?" Washington could feel blood trickling from where his cheek scraped the asphalt. He had survived firefights in Afghanistan, led covert operations in hostile territory, but this was different. His tactical superiority meant nothing against the system he was facing. Kellerman stood over him now, straightening his uniform. "Not so tough now, are you?" He gave Washington a sharp kick in the ribs. "That's for resisting." "Officer Kellerman?" Washington spoke clearly, despite his face being pressed into the ground. Everything that happened here was recorded on my dashboard camera, including your earlier threats." Kellerman froze mid-motion, his foot pulled back for another kick. The other officers exchanged uncertain glances. "The camera feed uploads automatically to a secure server," Washington continued, "along with GPS data and audio recording of our entire interaction." "He's lying," Kellerman said quickly, but there was a tremor in his voice. "Check the car. There's no camera." "The camera is military-grade, Officer Kellerman, designed to be undetectable." Washington kept his voice steady. "Similar to the ones we use to document Taliban activities. Perfect for gathering evidence of systematic harassment." The senior officer present stepped forward, studying Washington's Mercedes. "Someone check his credentials and call this in to the sergeant." Washington remained still as they searched his pockets, producing his military ID and security consultant credentials. He could hear the murmured conversations, the growing uncertainty in their voices as they realized who he was. Kellerman paced nervously, his earlier confidence evaporating. He's still resisting arrest. He attacked a police officer. "After you drew your weapon without cause," Washington reminded him. "After you escalated a routine traffic stop into a potentially lethal confrontation, all of which is now documented evidence." The senior officer spoke into his radio, requesting a supervisor at the scene. Around them, neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, cell phones recording the incident. The truth of what happened here would not be easily buried. Washington felt the weight of the moment. He had won the physical confrontation while maintaining his principles, but the real battle was just beginning. The system that enabled Kellerman's behavior wouldn't be defeated with martial arts or military tactics. It would take a different kind of strength. The strength to stand firm, to speak truth, to demand justice through proper channels. The tension in the air thickened as more officers arrived, their weapons drawn and aimed at Washington. Red and blue lights painted the quiet suburban street in harsh colors, while neighbors gathered at a safe distance, phones recording everything. A black SUV pulled up smoothly to the scene, its lights cutting through the chaos. Chief Rebecca Torres stepped out, her crisp uniform and commanding presence immediately drawing attention. Her dark eyes swept across the scene with military precision, taking in every detail. The officers with drawn weapons, the growing crowd of onlookers, and the handcuffed man lying face down on the pavement. "Status report," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of both her rank and her Marine Corps background. The officers straightened instinctively at her tone. Kellerman rushed forward. "Chief, we have a suspect who assaulted an officer during a routine traffic stop. He resisted arrest and—" Torres held up a hand, silencing him. One at a time, starting with the first responding officer. Her gaze settled on Kellerman. Why was he stopped? "Suspicious behavior, ma'am, driving slowly through the neighborhood, looking at houses." Torres nodded, though her expression remained neutral. "And the assault?" "He attacked me when I tried to remove him from the vehicle, took me to the ground." Kellerman's voice carried a note of indignation. The chief walked slowly around the scene, noting the position of vehicles, the scattered contents of Washington's wallet, the scuff marks on the pavement. Something about the man on the ground caught her attention, his controlled breathing, the disciplined way he held himself despite his uncomfortable position. "You?" she addressed Washington directly. "Identify yourself." "Commander Darius Washington, retired Navy SEAL," he replied clearly, maintaining his dignity despite his face being pressed against the asphalt. "Currently working as a security consultant investigating a series of burglaries in this area." Torres froze. The name triggered something in her memory, a flash of gunfire, the smell of burning fuel, a voice calling orders through the chaos of an ambush in Afghanistan. She studied his face more carefully. "Release him," she ordered suddenly. "But Chief," Kellerman protested, "now." Her tone left no room for argument. Two officers helped Washington to his feet, removing the handcuffs. He straightened his clothing with calm dignity, showing no sign of anger or resentment. "Everyone lower your weapons," Torres commanded. The officers complied, though some looked confused by the sudden change in situation. Torres approached Washington, her eyes narrowing as recognition dawned. Kandahar Province, 2009. Taliban ambush on a Marine convoy. Washington nodded slowly. "Your unit was pinned down. We were running counter-terrorism ops in the area." "You led the SEAL team that saved our lives," Torres said quietly. "Lost 2 of your men getting us out." 3, Washington corrected gently. "Johnson didn't make it to the medevac." The chief turned to address her officers, her voice sharp with authority. "This man is a decorated war hero who saved my life and the lives of 12 other Marines." She fixed Kellerman with a stern look. "Now I want to know exactly what happened here, and I want the truth." "He has dashboard camera footage," one officer volunteered. "Says it uploaded automatically to a server." Torres raised an eyebrow at Washington, who nodded confirmation. "Military-grade surveillance equipment. Standard procedure for my security work." "Chief," Kellerman stepped forward, his earlier confidence now tinged with nervousness. "Whatever the footage shows, you have to understand." "Officer Kellerman," Torres cut him off, "I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent until we review all the evidence." She turned to the senior officer present. "I want statements from everyone on scene, including civilian witnesses. Call Internal Affairs and have them meet me at headquarters." Washington stood quietly as the scene transformed around him. Officers who had aimed weapons at him minutes ago now looked away in embarrassment. Kellerman retreated to his patrol car, his face a mask of barely contained panic. "Commander Washington," Torres addressed him formally, "I apologize for your treatment today. I'd appreciate your cooperation in filing a complete report of this incident." "Of course, Chief," Washington replied, "though I hope we can discuss more than just today's events. The pattern of harassment in this neighborhood deserves attention." Torres nodded, understanding the deeper implications. "We'll address everything, Commander. You have my word." She paused, then added more quietly, "I never got to properly thank you for what you did in Kandahar." "No thanks needed, Chief. We all served with honor." Washington's calm dignity emphasized the stark contrast between his behavior and Kellerman's actions. The chief began organizing the scene, dispatching officers to gather witnesses and evidence. The neighbors who had gathered to record the incident started to disperse, sensing that justice would now be served. Chief Torres stared at Washington, memories flooding back with crystal clarity. The thunderous explosions, the acrid smoke, and the desperate radio calls for help in the Kandahar mountains all came rushing back. Her unit had been pinned down, taking heavy fire from Taliban positions. They'd lost hope until Washington's SEAL team appeared like ghosts in the darkness, turning the tide of battle. "I can't believe I didn't recognize you immediately," Torres said, shaking her head. She turned to the officers, still hovering nearby. "Get those handcuffs off him right now." As Washington stood and brushed off his clothes, Torres addressed her assembled officers. 8 years ago, this man led a SEAL team through hostile territory to save my unit. We were trapped, outnumbered, with 3 dead and more wounded. Commander Washington lost 3 of his own men getting us out. Her voice carried both authority and emotion. "And now I find him face down on our streets?" Kellerman shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Torres noticed his nervous movement and fixed him with a stern gaze. "Officer Kellerman, surrender your weapon and badge to Sergeant Martinez. You're on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Her tone left no room for argument. "Chief, you can't just—" Kellerman started to protest. "I can, and I am," Torres cut him off. "Martinez, escort Officer Kellerman back to the station. I want his dashcam footage secured immediately, along with all body camera recordings from responding officers." As Kellerman was led away, Torres turned back to Washington. "Commander, I need your statement, but first—" She extended her hand. "Thank you. I never thought I'd get the chance to say that properly." Washington shook her hand firmly. "You would have done the same, Chief Torres." We all wore the uniform. Torres nodded, then gestured to her SUV. "Let's talk somewhere more private. I want to hear everything about this traffic stop, and then we need to discuss why you're really in my jurisdiction." Inside her vehicle, Washington explained his security consulting work and the pattern of burglaries he was investigating. Torres listened intently, her expression darkening, as she recognized similarities to other reported incidents. "The targeting of minority homeowners caught my attention," Washington explained. "The burglars seem to have detailed knowledge of patrol patterns and security responses." Torres pulled out her tablet and began accessing police records. "Kellerman's traffic stop data has been concerning me for months. His percentage of minority stops is significantly higher than other officers, but there's been more." She scrolled through several screens. Complaints filed, suspicious timing of patrol routes, and connections we couldn't quite prove. "His brother-in-law runs a security company," Washington added, "one that's been expanding rapidly despite the economic downturn." Torres's eyes narrowed. "How did you know that?" "It's why I was here today, following leads before my job interview." Washington smiled slightly. "I prefer to be thorough." Torres began typing rapidly on her tablet. "I'm authorizing a full internal affairs investigation into Kellerman's activities for the past 18 months. We'll cross-reference his patrol patterns with reported burglaries and any connections to private security contracts." She paused, looking at Washington with professional respect. "I'd like to bring you in as a consultant on this investigation, Commander. Your security expertise, combined with your military background, could be invaluable." "I accept," Washington replied without hesitation. "But Chief, this goes beyond Kellerman. The sophistication of these operations suggests a broader network." "Agreed." Torres pulled up another file. "Look at this. Kellerman's traffic stops often coincide with security system installations by his brother-in-law's company. The same homes are later burglarized, but only specific items are taken. It's targeted, professional. They're using police harassment to pressure homeowners into buying security systems," Washington concluded. "Systems that later provide access for the burglaries." Torres closed her tablet decisively. "We'll need to move carefully. Kellerman has friends in the department, and his brother-in-law has political connections." She looked at Washington seriously. "This could get complicated." "Complicated is what I do best, Chief." Washington's calm confidence reminded Torres of that night in Afghanistan. "But we'll need evidence that will stand up in court." "I'm putting together a task force," Torres declared. "Off the books for now. We'll start with Kellerman's dash cam footage from today and work backward through every complaint, every suspicious stop, every connection to these burglaries." She extended her hand again. "Welcome aboard, Commander Washington. Let's clean up my department." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as Torres and Washington began planning their investigation. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The decorated SEAL commander who had once saved Torres's life was now her ally in uncovering a web of corruption that had ensnared her police department. Chief Torres spread the evidence folders across her office desk, each one revealing another layer of Kellerman's corrupt operation. Washington stood beside her, his trained eye catching details that painted an even darker picture than initially suspected. "Look at these traffic stop patterns," Torres said, pointing to a map dotted with red markers. Every single one of Kellerman's targeted stops involved successful minority professionals. Doctors, lawyers, business owners, all living in upscale neighborhoods. Washington picked up one of the files, and each stop followed the same protocol. Aggressive questioning, threats of arrest, suggesting they needed better security in their neighborhood. That's where his brother-in-law's company, Elite Shield Security, comes in. Torres pulled out another document. Within 2 weeks of each stop, the homeowners signed contracts for new security systems. They felt pressured, vulnerable. But that was just the beginning, Washington added, his voice grave. The security systems were the key to the burglaries. Each home was hit within 3 months of installation. Torres nodded, pulling up detailed crime scene photos on her computer. Professional jobs, they knew exactly what they were looking for. Artwork, jewelry, rare collectibles, items that could be easily transported and sold through private collectors. That's why my security firm was hired, Washington explained. The insurance companies noticed the pattern. Too many successful minority professionals being targeted, all with the same security company, all in neighborhoods under Kellerman's patrol route. Torres looked up sharply. You were getting close. Too close. Yes, Washington confirmed. I had already connected the burglaries to Elite Shield. I just needed proof of the police connection. He paused, a grim realization crossing his face. That's why Kellerman pulled me over today. He knew who I was. Torres pulled out Kellerman's personnel file. We found this in his locker. She handed Washington a surveillance photo of himself meeting with insurance investigators. He was planning to eliminate you and make it look like a justified shooting, a traffic stop gone wrong. Washington studied the photo, his military training allowing him to maintain composure despite the revelation that he'd been marked for death. Classic elimination technique. Create a situation where deadly force appears reasonable. But he didn't count on your training, Torres observed, or our shared history. The conspiracy goes deeper than just Kellerman and his brother-in-law, Washington said, gesturing to the financial records spread before them. These burglaries have netted over $2 million in the past year alone. That kind of operation needs more protection, more inside help. Torres began connecting documents with pushpins and red string on her office wall. 3 other officers had unusual patrol patterns coordinating with Elite Shield installations. And look at these response times. She pointed to a series of reports. Every burglarized home had delayed police response, giving the thieves plenty of time to clear out. They were targeting specific homes, Washington noted, examining the victim profiles. Successful minorities who'd recently moved into predominantly white neighborhoods. People who might hesitate to challenge police authority or file formal complaints. Using systemic racism as cover for organized crime, Torres said disgustedly. The victims were already afraid of police harassment. Kellerman exploited that fear, used it to push them toward his brother-in-law's security company. Washington moved closer to the wall of evidence. And today, when he saw me in the neighborhood, he recognized you as the investigator who could expose everything, Torres finished. The traffic stop wasn't random harassment. It was a planned hit. She turned to face Washington directly. If I hadn't arrived when I did, if I hadn't recognized you, Kellerman would have executed me, Washington stated matter-of-factly. And the department would have accepted his story about feeling threatened during a routine traffic stop. Torres slammed her hand on the desk. Not on my watch. We're taking down this entire operation. She began gathering key documents. I'm calling the FBI. This is organized crime using police authority to facilitate burglary, extortion, and attempted murder. They'll need someone on the inside, Washington said. Someone who can testify about the security system's vulnerabilities and connection to the burglaries. Are you offering to continue your investigation, Commander? Torres asked, already knowing the answer. With official sanction, this time, Washington confirmed. We'll need to move carefully. Kellerman's just one piece of a larger criminal enterprise. Torres nodded, understanding the delicate nature of exposing corruption within her own department. I'll keep you protected while we build the case. But Washington? She paused, making sure she had his full attention. Watch your back. They've already tried to kill you once. That's why I need to stay on this, Washington replied. These criminals aren't just stealing property. They're exploiting people's fears, using badges and uniforms to commit crimes against the very communities we're supposed to protect. Torres gathered the most damning evidence into a secure file. We'll start with Kellerman and work our way up. His dashcam footage from today, combined with your testimony about the attempted hit, gives us enough to bring in the FBI. The scope of the conspiracy lay exposed across Torres's office. Maps, photos, financial records, and patrol logs revealing a sophisticated criminal operation hidden behind a badge. What had started as a routine traffic stop had uncovered a network of corruption that reached deep into the police department and the private security sector, all built on the systematic exploitation of minority communities. Chief Torres stood in the police station's main bullpen, her posture rigid with military bearing as she faced Officer Kellerman. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting harsh shadows across his face as she approached, badge and handcuffs ready. Officer Brad Kellerman, Torres announced, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. You are under arrest for corruption, conspiracy to commit burglary, and attempted murder of a civilian investigator. Kellerman's cold blue eyes darted around the room, searching for allies among his fellow officers. But under Torres's commanding presence, no one moved to help him. His face twisted with rage as she continued reading his rights. "This is garbage," he spat, his stocky frame tensing as Torres removed his badge. "You're taking the word of some civilian over a 15-year veteran?" "We're taking the word of evidence," Torres replied calmly, nodding to two internal affairs officers who stepped forward with handcuffs. "Your dashcam footage, financial records, and documented pattern of harassment tell the whole story." Washington observed from near Torres's office, maintaining a professional distance while keeping his tactical awareness sharp. He noticed several officers shifting uncomfortably, their body language suggesting they knew more than they were willing to share. As the internal affairs officers secured Kellerman's wrists behind his back, he turned his hate-filled gaze toward Washington. "You have no idea what you've started," he snarled. "You think you're safe just because you've got the chief in your pocket? This goes deeper than you know." Washington met his stare steadily, recognizing the threat for what it was. Not just the angry words of a cornered man, but a warning of what was to come. His military instincts, honed through years of combat operations, told him Kellerman's arrest was just the beginning. In an office across town, three men gathered around a mahogany desk, watching a live feed of Kellerman's arrest on a laptop screen. James Kellerman, Brad's brother-in-law and owner of Elite Shield Security, slammed his fist on the desk. "This Washington character is becoming a serious problem," he growled, turning to his associates. "Brad was supposed to handle him quietly during that traffic stop. Now we've got the FBI sniffing around." Marcus Wheeler, a senior partner in the security firm, leaned back in his leather chair. "We need to contain this situation quickly. Washington knows too much about our operation, and he's got Torres backing him now." The third man, a silver-haired figure whose expensive suit spoke of serious money, nodded slowly. "Then we eliminate the problem. No more subtle approaches, no more using police cover. We take him out directly." "He's a former Navy SEAL," Wheeler cautioned. "This isn't going to be like our usual targets. Then we use enough force to overwhelm even his training," the silver-haired man replied coldly. "Get your best teams ready. I want this handled within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Washington sat in his home office, analyzing security footage from recent burglaries. His tactical mindset had already shifted from investigation to survival preparation. He knew Kellerman's arrest would force the conspirators to act desperately. His phone buzzed with a text from Torres. Multiple unmarked vehicles monitoring the station. Be careful, they're making moves. Washington immediately began implementing his security protocols. He moved through his house with practiced efficiency, checking sightlines and potential entry points. His military training kicked in as he prepared for what he knew was coming. He retrieved his go bag from a hidden compartment containing essential supplies and defensive equipment. Years of combat experience had taught him to always be ready for the worst-case scenario. As he worked, he thought about the victims of the burglary ring, families who had worked hard for their success, only to have it stolen by corrupt officers abusing their power. His secure phone rang, a contact from his private security firm. "Commander, we've detected unusual activity around your location. Multiple vehicles with professional surveillance equipment. These aren't police, they're private military contractors." "Understood," Washington replied calmly. "How many teams?" "At least 3 that we can identify. They're setting up a coordinated approach. These are serious operators, sir." Washington's mind was already mapping out defensive positions and escape routes. "Keep monitoring. Alert me of any changes in their pattern." He moved to secure his weapons cache, knowing he would need every advantage against professional hit teams. The irony wasn't lost on him. After years of military service protecting others, he now faced enemies on American soil, criminals hiding behind badges and business suits. His daughter called next, her voice tense with concern. "Dad, I just heard about Kellerman's arrest. Are you safe?" "I'm taking precautions," he assured her, touched by her worry despite their strained relationship. "Stay away from my house for now. These people are desperate, and they might try to use you to get to me." "Let me help," she insisted. "I can file for emergency protective orders, get the courts involved." "No," Washington cut her off firmly. "These people don't respect legal documents. They've already shown they're willing to kill. The best thing you can do is stay safe and let me handle this." After ending the call, Washington continued his preparations. He knew the attack would come soon. Professional killers wouldn't wait long once they had their target located. The criminals had escalated from using corrupt police power to direct violence, showing their desperation to silence him before he could expose their entire network. As darkness fell, Washington settled into his defensive position, ready for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. The criminals had chosen to abandon subtlety for brute force, but they would soon learn that they weren't the only ones capable of violence. The difference was, Washington's violence would serve justice, not corruption. The warehouse loomed dark and silent against the night sky. Washington crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, his trained eyes scanning the perimeter. He had tracked the conspirators here after intercepting their communications, discovering their cache of stolen goods from dozens of targeted families. Chief Torres moved quietly beside him, her own military training evident in her precise movements. "3 vehicles just pulled up on the north side," she whispered, checking her service weapon. "Professional operators, just like you said." Washington nodded, noting the tactical formation of the approaching figures. They're elite SHIELD security teams, James Kellerman's best hit squads. He could see their practiced movements, the way they covered angles and maintained spacing. These weren't common criminals. They were trained killers. The memory of his last kill in Afghanistan flashed through his mind, the moment that had led to his vow never to take another life. But as he watched the armed men spreading out to surround them, he knew his principles would be tested tonight. "Rebecca," he said quietly, using Torres's first name, "these men won't hesitate to kill. Are you sure you want to be here?" Torres checked her tactical vest, her expression determined. "You saved my life in that Taliban ambush. I'm not leaving you to face this alone." A bullet sparked off the container above them, and the night erupted into chaos. Washington pushed Torres behind cover as automatic weapons fire ripped through the air. His combat instincts surged, identifying firing positions and calculating angles of attack. "Move!" he commanded, leading Torres through a gap between containers as their position was flanked. Two operators in black tactical gear appeared, weapons raised. Washington's body responded with practiced efficiency, disarming the first man with a precise strike to the wrist, then using him as a shield against his partner's fire. Torres engaged another team trying to cut off their escape route, her police training enhanced by military experience. Washington were being herded toward the main warehouse. He recognized the tactic, forcing them into a confined space where superior numbers would have the advantage. But the warehouse also contained their evidence, and he couldn't let it be destroyed. They burst through a side door into the dimly lit interior. Rows of stolen goods filled the space. Expensive electronics, artwork, jewelry, all taken from families targeted for their success and race. Washington's anger rose at the sight, but he forced it down, maintaining tactical focus. James Kellerman's voice echoed through the warehouse. "Commander Washington, you should have stayed out of our business. Now you've forced us to handle things the hard way." Washington positioned Torres behind a solid crate, scanning for threats. "Your brother-in-law is going to prison, James." "How many families did you rob to fund this operation?" "Those people didn't deserve what they had," James spat back. "They got special treatment, special loans, special considerations. We just redistributed the wealth." Movement caught Washington's eye. 3 operators moving on their position from different angles. His muscles tensed, ready to respond. The first attacker came in low, but Washington had read the move. He redirected the man's momentum, sending him crashing into a stack of boxes. The second rushed in with a knife, forcing Washington to make a critical choice. His SEAL training offered 3 lethal solutions, but he chose a fourth option, catching the knife arm and dislocating the shoulder instead of breaking the neck. The man dropped with a scream of pain. Torres handled the third attacker with textbook police defensive tactics, subduing him efficiently, but more were coming. Washington could hear them moving into position. "Last chance, Washington," James called out. "Walk away now, or we finish this permanently." Washington's response was to move, fast and silent, flanking James's position. He found the security firm owner behind a makeshift command center, coordinating his teams through a radio. 2 bodyguards raised their weapons, but Washington was already in motion. The fight was brutal and efficient. Washington moved like liquid steel, his decades of training expressing itself in precise, controlled violence. He broke bones instead of necks, disabled instead of killed, each movement carefully measured to incapacitate without causing death. James grabbed a fallen weapon, firing wildly. Washington rolled behind a crate of stolen electronics, then surged forward as the man reloaded. The security firm owner was skilled, but he had never faced anyone like Washington in real combat. Their struggle sent them crashing into shelving units. James fought desperately, trying to force his gun toward Washington's head. Washington could have ended it with a single lethal strike, but instead chose to disable the weapon with a precision break of James's wrist. "You don't have the killer instinct anymore, Commander?" James gasped through the pain. "That's why you'll lose?" Washington secured the struggling man in a restraining hold. "You're wrong. True strength is choosing not to kill when you can." He rendered James unconscious with a precise chokehold, carefully controlling the pressure to avoid permanent damage. Torres appeared with her weapon trained on the last few operators, who were surrendering after seeing their leader fall. "Police units are 2 minutes out," she reported. "We did it, Commander." Washington looked around the warehouse at the disabled but living attackers. His vow remained unbroken, but the cost had been high. His body ached from choosing harder but less lethal options in each engagement. "Get the evidence response teams in here," he told Torres, keeping watch over their prisoners. These families deserve to get their possessions back. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as Washington began securing the scene, his warrior skills once again used to protect rather than destroy. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the warehouse windows, illuminating the aftermath of the night's confrontation. Evidence response teams methodically cataloged the stolen property, while uniformed officers led away the handcuffed security operators. Washington stood with Chief Torres, watching as James Kellerman was escorted to a waiting patrol car. "Federal agents are already building their case," Torres said, her voice carrying the weight of the long night. "The evidence we recovered here connects everything: the targeted traffic stops, the security firm's surveillance, and the burglaries. It's all documented." Washington nodded, his muscles still tense from the fight. They were careful about their records, every victim's information, every stolen item. They tracked it all. Their own greed will convict them. FBI agents moved through the warehouse, photographing documents from James Kellerman's command center. The papers revealed years of systematic targeting, with Brad Kellerman feeding information about successful minority professionals to his brother-in-law's security firm. "Officer Kellerman's dashcam footage will be the final nail," Torres continued, watching the federal investigators work. He was so confident in his protection that he never bothered to disable it. "We have him on video escalating that traffic stop with clear intent to create a deadly situation." Washington thought about how close he'd come to becoming another statistic, another black man killed during a routine traffic stop. He never expected to encounter someone who could fight back and still choose not to hurt him. Torres turned to face him directly. "Your restraint exposed the truth in a way violence never could. These men wanted to provoke a violent response to justify their actions. You gave them nothing to hide behind." The warehouse doors opened as more federal agents arrived, these wearing jackets marked Civil Rights Division across the back. They moved with purpose, carrying boxes of documents and computer equipment seized from Elite Shield Security's offices. "The investigation is expanding," Torres explained. "They're looking at every traffic stop, every arrest Kellerman and his collaborators made over the past 5 years. The pattern of racial profiling and harassment is impossible to ignore." A young FBI agent approached them with a tablet displaying security footage. "Chief Torres, we found video of Officer Kellerman coordinating with the burglary teams. He used traffic stops to clear target neighborhoods, giving them windows of opportunity to hit the homes." Washington watched the footage, seeing how the corruption had worked. "How many other officers were involved?" "3 confirmed so far," Torres said grimly. "But I'm implementing a complete departmental review, new oversight procedures, enhanced bias training, and a civilian review board with real power." She paused, her expression determined. "What happened to you can never happen again." More evidence teams arrived, these ones specifically focused on returning stolen property to the victims. They carefully documented each item, creating a database to match possessions with their rightful owners. Washington recognized pieces from his case files, artwork, jewelry, and family heirlooms taken from successful doctors, lawyers, and business owners targeted for their race and success. "The U.S. Attorney is charging them under federal civil rights statutes," Torres continued. "Conspiracy, corruption, and hate crimes. They're facing decades in federal prison." Washington watched as agents carried out boxes of surveillance files. The real victory will be changing the system that allowed this to happen. Torres nodded in agreement. "I've already scheduled meetings with community leaders and civil rights organizations. We're establishing new policies for traffic stops, requiring detailed documentation and regular review of officer conduct patterns." She turned to face Washington directly. "I want you involved in the reform process. Your military experience and this incident give you a unique perspective we need." "What about resistance from within the department?" Washington asked, knowing how difficult institutional change could be. There will be pushback, Torres acknowledged, but this case makes it impossible to deny the problem. We have documented evidence of systemic abuse. Officers who resist reform will face a clear choice: adapt or find another profession. The warehouse was nearly cleared now, the evidence secured and transported to federal custody. Washington felt the weight of the night's events, knowing that his choice to investigate the burglaries had exposed something far more sinister. The FBI's civil rights investigation will take months, Torres said, watching the final evidence teams finish their work. But local changes start immediately. New oversight, new training, new accountability. Your daughter's civil rights organization has already offered to help develop the programs. Washington looked up sharply at the mention of his daughter. Torres smiled. She called when she heard about the incident. I think she's proud of how you handled it. A weight lifted from Washington's chest. His choice to maintain his principles, to fight without killing, had done more than just expose corruption. It had opened a door to healing his relationship with his daughter. Real change takes time, he said, watching the sun rise higher over the warehouse. But exposing the truth is the first step. Torres put a hand on his shoulder. You did more than expose the truth. You showed a better way forward. These reforms aren't just about stopping bad actors. They're about building something better. The last of the evidence teams departed, leaving the warehouse empty of its stolen goods. But Washington knew they had recovered something more valuable than property. They had found an opportunity for genuine transformation, a chance to address the systemic issues that had allowed corruption to flourish. The police department's community room buzzed with activity as Chief Torres stood at the podium, addressing the gathered crowd of officers, community leaders, and media representatives. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, highlighting the determination on her face. Today marks a new chapter for our department, Torres announced, her voice clear and resolute. The recent events have exposed serious problems in our system, but they've also shown us a path forward. She gestured to Washington, who sat in the front row. I'm announcing the appointment of Darius Washington as our new civilian consultant for community relations and departmental reform. Washington rose as Torres called him forward. He could feel the mix of reactions in the room. Support from community leaders who knew change was needed. Uncertainty from officers worried about what his appointment meant for them. Commander Washington brings unique qualifications to this role, Torres continued. His military leadership experience, his recent encounter with departmental misconduct, and most importantly, his demonstrated commitment to principle over violence make him exactly who we need to help rebuild trust between law enforcement and our community. From her seat near the back of the room, Angela Washington watched her father take the podium. She had arrived late, slipping in quietly after court. Now, seeing him stand before the crowd with quiet dignity, she felt something shift in her understanding of him. Our goal isn't just to eliminate corruption, Washington addressed the audience, his deep voice carrying authority earned through years of command. It's to create a department that truly serves and protects all citizens equally. That requires more than just new policies. It demands a change in culture. Angela listened as her father outlined his vision for reform. She had spent years viewing his military background as part of the system of violence she fought against in her civil rights work. But watching him now, she began to see something different in his warrior's discipline. After the presentation, small groups formed throughout the room as people discussed the proposed changes. Angela made her way toward her father, who was speaking with a group of community leaders. He noticed her approach, and she saw both hope and uncertainty flash across his face. "Dad," she said softly when she reached him. The others politely stepped away, giving them space. "Angela." His voice carried the weight of their years of distance. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I heard about what happened with Officer Kellerman, she said. About how you handled it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You could have hurt him. With your training, you could have justified it as self-defense. Washington nodded slowly. There's been enough violence. I learned in the SEALs that true strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about having the discipline to avoid unnecessary harm. That's not what I understood before, Angela admitted. I saw your military service as part of the problem. But you were trying to protect people all along, weren't you? Everything I learned as a warrior was about protection, he said, about standing between danger and those who can't defend themselves. That never changed. Just the battlefield did. Tears welled in Angela's eyes. When I heard about the traffic stop, how close it came to... She couldn't finish the sentence. But you stayed true to your principles, even when he was threatening your life. Those principles are what kept me alive through 4 combat tours, Washington said gently. They're what let me sleep at night, knowing every action I took was in defense of others. Chief Torres approached them, holding a folder. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to show you both something. She opened the folder, revealing letters from community members. These started arriving as soon as the story broke, people sharing their own experiences with profiling, but also expressing hope that real change is possible now. Angela took one of the letters, reading it quickly. This is powerful stuff, she said. They see you as proof that the system can be reformed from within. That's why we need both of you, Torres said. Darius can help us rebuild the department's culture, while your legal advocacy keeps us accountable to the community. Washington looked at his daughter. What do you think? Could we work together on this? Angela met his gaze, seeing her father clearly for perhaps the first time. I think it's time I understood that fighting for justice doesn't always mean fighting with fists. She smiled slightly. Maybe we can learn from each other. I'd like that, Washington said softly. Around them, the community room remained full of people discussing the proposed reforms. But in that moment, father and daughter began bridging their own divide, finding common ground in their shared commitment to protecting others and pursuing justice. Torres watched them with satisfaction, knowing that Washington's appointment was already creating positive change, not just for the department, but for the community and his own family. The man who had faced discrimination and potential death was now helping transform the very institution that had threatened him, proving that principle and restraint could be more powerful than violence and fear. After the community meeting dispersed, Washington and Angela moved to the small garden outside the police department. Pink and purple flowers swayed in the gentle breeze as they sat on a wooden bench, the afternoon sun warming their faces. I've been thinking about what you said in there, Angela began, her legal briefcase resting beside her, about protection being at the heart of everything you do. She turned to face her father. I spent so many years angry about your military service, seeing it as part of the system of violence I was fighting against. Washington nodded thoughtfully. I understand why you saw it that way. The world can look very black and white when you're fighting for justice. But watching how you handled the situation with Kellerman, Angela's voice trembled slightly. You had every right to defend yourself aggressively. You could have seriously hurt him, and everyone would have understood why. But that wouldn't have solved anything, Washington said softly. It would have just fed into the cycle of violence. Angela reached into her briefcase and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed a much younger Washington in his Navy SEAL uniform, holding a small Angela on his shoulders. Both were smiling broadly. Mom gave me this last week, she explained. When I told her about what happened, she reminded me of how you used to explain your job to me when I was little. Angela traced the edge of the photo with her finger. You always said you were a protector, not a fighter. Washington's eyes moistened at the memory. That's what I tried to teach my SEAL teams too. The most powerful weapon we have isn't our training or our equipment, it's our judgment. Knowing when not to use force is just as important as knowing how. I see that now, Angela said. When Chief Torres told me how you saved her unit in Afghanistan, how you managed to get everyone out without a single casualty. She paused, emotion filling her voice. That was the same man who faced down Kellerman's gun without violence. Washington placed his hand over his daughter's. Everything I learned as a warrior was about protecting others. Sometimes that meant fighting, but more often it meant finding ways to prevent fighting. That's what I'm hoping to do here with the police reforms. The community really believes in you, Dad, Angela said, gesturing toward the police department. Those letters Torres showed us. People see hope in what you did. They see the possibility for real change. Change happens when we bridge divides, Washington replied, between police and community, between military and civilian understanding. Between fathers and daughters, Angela added with a small smile. Washington squeezed her hand. Especially between fathers and daughters. I'd like to help, Angela said firmly. Not just with the legal side of the reforms, but with understanding your perspective better. Maybe we could have dinner once a week? Talk about your experiences? Help me see what I missed before? Washington's face lit up with joy. I'd like that very much. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the flowers sway in the breeze. The photo rested between them, a reminder of the connection they once had and were now rebuilding. Through their reconciliation, they were proving that understanding could overcome prejudice, that love could bridge any divide, and that the strength to protect was the greatest power of all. The man who had faced discrimination and danger had become a catalyst for change, not just in his community, but in his own family. Washington's principles had not only transformed an institution, they had brought his daughter back to him, healing the deepest wound in his heart. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. And tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.